Okay, so I'd like to ask you a little bit about, you spoke about validation, and you also mentioned the criticism that people who do research on in their own practice, that they could easily be just clouded by by bias and their own thinking. So could I ask you, how can we make, or how do you see living educational theory as being rigorous enough to withstand criticisms of bias and of
Well, the way I do this is, first of all, by embracing what Hans Georg Gadamer pointed out in his Truth and Method. And he said, look, we all can't avoid bias. That he said, look, we've got to see that bias and prejudice often comes into our research. What we can do is to try to reduce that. I then use Popper's insight, what he called the importance of intersubjective testing. He recognized that objectivity was grounded in intersubjective testing. And he said, look, I've generalized that idea to what he called the mutual rational controls of critical discussion. So that's the second stage, where you recognize that to reduce bias and that claim of just being anecdotal or subjective, it requires the critical discussion of others. And that's why I like this notion of democratic evaluation with others in a validation group of 3 to 8 people. And then I strengthen the validity with the help of Jürgen Habermas's insights in his book on communication and the evolution of society. And he said there were 4 social criteria we use of each other to try to develop a comprehensibility between us, to try to understand. And he said that those questions that I put into the questions of comprehensibility, strengthening the evidence that we use in our explanation, deepening our socio-cultural, socio-historical understandings, and enhancing the authenticity of what we're doing in showing we're living our values as fully as possible, that those 3 elements, first of all, Hans Georg Gadamer, embrace bias. You can't avoid that, you can reduce it. Use Popper's insight about the mutual rational control of critical discussion, and then become more precise in the use of Habermas's 4 criteria to strengthen the validity of your explanation.
that makes it very clear. It really does. Yeah, that makes it really clear. Thank you, Jack. Would you consider people, are encouraged to have critical friends in the process of doing their research? Would you consider critical friends to be part of that validation group setting that you were just discussing?
I do. I see that you can have a critical friend. So you can have a critical friend who is really important. But I also believe that, if you like, critical friends help to constitute a validation group, because this gives you, if you like, more of those mutual controls of critical discussion, not just relying on one person. That's why I think between 3 to 8 people, I've often found that is manageable. And you get a variety of responses that help you to reduce bias and can enhance both your inquiry and the validity of your explanations. So I think the whole process is grounded in the idea of a critical friend.